The smell of burnt oil and alien spices filled the air as the human waiter moved between the long tables. His steps were quiet, his back bent slightly, his hands holding a tray of steaming bowls. Aliens of different shapes and sizes filled the noisy dining hall. Some had scaled skin, some had glowing eyes, and some had sharp teeth that clicked whenever they laughed. To them, the human was invisible, just another servant who brought food and cleaned tables. He kept his eyes low, never meeting the gaze of the customers. He had learned early that a human stare could be taken as disrespect. The pay was small, the hours were long, but it was better than starving. On this station, humans were rare. Most worked in low jobs like cleaning, cooking, or fixing broken machines. No alien expected anything more from them. While moving toward the back corner, the waiter noticed something unusual. A small alien child sat alone on the floor near the waste bins. Its skin was pale, and its thin arms trembled as it tried to lift a half-eaten piece of bread from the trash. The child's large black eyes looked desperate, filled with hunger. No one cared. Aliens walked past, laughing, shouting, and ignoring the weak little one. The waiter froze for a moment, glancing around carefully. Giving food without charge was against the rules. He could be punished, maybe even thrown off the station. His boss, a fat alien with 4 arms, had warned him many times. Every credit counts. No free meals, no exceptions. Still, the sight of the child's shaking hands made something inside him twist. He turned quickly toward the kitchen counter and placed the empty tray down. With quick fingers, he scooped a fresh roll of bread and a small cup of broth into a bowl. His heart raced as he covered it with a dirty cloth to hide it. He whispered to himself, "Just this once." Moving carefully, he walked toward the corner where the child sat. He crouched low, using his body to shield the bowl from the others. The child looked up, startled, ready to run. But the human gave a small smile, soft and gentle. Without a word, he slid the bowl forward. The child blinked, sniffed the warm steam, and then grabbed the food quickly as if it might vanish. It began eating fast, stuffing the bread into its mouth, broth dripping down its chin. The waiter watched silently, making sure no one saw. His chest felt lighter as the child's shaking slowed, its eyes softening with relief. For a moment, time felt different. In a hall full of noise, laughter, and anger, there was only silence between him and the child. Gratitude filled those black eyes, something so simple yet so powerful. Then a sound broke the moment. A chair scraped loudly. The waiter's head snapped up. Across the room, 2 tall alien guards stood near the door, their gazes sharp, their faces unreadable. Had they seen? His heart pounded. Sweat rolled down his back. He quickly stood, pretending to clean the floor, wiping the ground with the cloth that had hidden the food. The child, now finished, clutched the empty bowl tight, as if afraid it would be taken away. The waiter gave a small shake of his head, silently telling the child to hide it. The alien child understood and slipped the bowl under its thin cloak. The waiter turned away, his hands trembling, and returned to his duties. He carried trays, cleaned spilled drinks, and nodded to shouting customers, but his mind was restless. Every few minutes, his eyes flicked toward the corner, where the child was now curled up with a softer, calmer expression. He didn't notice the shadow in the upper balcony. Hidden behind the colored glass, a figure with golden robes and a tall crown had been watching. The alien leader's eyes narrowed, studying the human's small act. It was not the food that caught the leader's attention. It was the risk. No alien servant would have done such a thing. Later that night, when the hall grew quiet and the last customer left, the waiter wiped the tables in silence. The child was gone, leaving only a small thread of cloth where it had sat. He picked it up, holding it in his palm. He felt strangely proud, but also nervous. Behind him, heavy footsteps echoed. He turned and froze. 2 alien guards stood there again, their weapons hanging at their sides, their glowing eyes fixed on him. "You," one of them growled. The waiter's throat went dry. He set the cloth down slowly, his hands trembling. The guard stepped closer. "Come with us." The waiter swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, to ask why, but no words came out. His heart hammered against his ribs as they took him by the arms and led him away. In the shadows of the empty hall, the golden-robed figure remained watching, silent and thoughtful. The small act of kindness had been seen, and its weight was greater than the human could ever imagine. The next morning, the dining hall buzzed louder than usual. Alien merchants with long robes whispered in corners, their voices low but sharp. Soldiers with armor clinking against their scaled skin sat in groups, their eyes darting toward the kitchen door more than toward their food. Even the servants, usually silent, kept glancing at one another. Something strange was spreading through the station like smoke. The waiter noticed the stares. Every time he carried a tray, a pair of alien eyes followed him. Every time he cleaned a table, someone seemed to be whispering. He tried to ignore it, focusing on his work, but unease clung to him like a shadow. He could still feel the memory of the guard's hands gripping his arms the night before. They had dragged him to a dark hallway, said nothing, and then released him without explanation. He had not slept properly since. At the far side of the hall, two reptilian traders argued. Their voices were loud, words carrying across the tables. They say the human gave food freely, one hissed, his forked tongue flicking. Impossible. Humans fear rules. They do not risk punishment, the other replied, but his tone was uncertain. The waiter pretended not to hear, though the words pierced him. He knew they were talking about him, but he dared not show it. He lowered his head and kept moving, even as his heart thudded faster. By the waste bins, where the small alien child had sat the night before, he saw only emptiness. The child was gone. For a moment, he wondered if it had been taken away, or worse. But then, as he bent to wipe a table, a tiny hand appeared from behind a pillar. The same pale alien child peeked out, eyes wide, watching him. The waiter gave the faintest nod, his lips pressed tight. The child slipped back into the shadows, unseen by anyone else. Relief washed over him, though it did little to calm the storm building in the hall. Unknown to the waiter, in the upper chambers of the station, leaders and officers were already speaking his name. A council of 6 aliens sat around a round table made of black stone. Holograms of the dining hall flickered above the surface, showing scenes of the human moving between tables, his every step tracked. One alien with horns curling over its head leaned forward. This one breaks rules for a weaker life, strange for his kind. Their history tells of greed, not mercy. Another, with eyes glowing blue, shook her head. Perhaps it is not strange. Humans are unpredictable. That is what makes them dangerous. The golden-robed leader, who had watched from the balcony, raised one hand for silence. I saw him. He acted without thought of gain, a single kindness given when no one else dared. We will watch further. Sometimes the smallest spark grows into a fire. Back in the hall, the whispers only grew stronger. A group of alien soldiers entered, their armor shining under the dim lights. They walked past the waiter, their boots heavy against the floor. One of them stopped suddenly, turning to look at him. The soldier's mandibles clicked as if tasting the air. So this is the one, he muttered to his companion. The waiter's hands went cold. He forced himself to keep moving, carrying a tray to another table. His every movement felt heavier, as though the air itself pressed against him. Customers kept watching, some with curiosity, others with distrust. By midday, a new rumor spread. Some claimed the human had been ordered to give food as a test, others that he carried secret powers hidden by his weak appearance. The lies grew and twisted, but all of them centered on him. For the first time since arriving at the station, the waiter was no longer invisible. Later, when the rush of customers slowed, he stepped into the back to wash dishes. The clatter of bowls and the hiss of steaming water filled the small room. He leaned against the counter, his hands trembling. "Why me?" he whispered under his breath. "I only gave bread." The door creaked. A fellow servant, a thin alien with 4 eyes, slipped inside. It glanced around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "They are talking about you. The guards, the traders, even the council. Be careful, human. Attention here is never safe." The waiter stared, his stomach tightening. He wanted to ask questions, but the alien servant hurried away, leaving him alone with the dripping sound of water. That evening, when the hall emptied again, the waiter walked outside into the station's metal corridors. The lights above flickered, and the hum of machinery echoed through the walls. He felt the weight of unseen eyes following him. At every corner, figures were whispered and fell silent as he passed. He did not know that high above, in the leader's chamber, his image was once again under watch. The golden-robed figure stood before the hologram, hands clasped behind his back. His voice was calm but filled with curiosity. "Strange," he murmured. They call humans weak, yet weakness does not risk punishment for another. Perhaps this one is not weak at all. The other council members remained silent, but the decision was already forming among them. The human would not remain a simple waiter for long. Something had begun, and the station itself seemed to lean closer, listening. The sound of metal boots echoed through the dining hall as the waiter placed bowls on the tables. His back stiffened when the doors slid open and two armored guards entered. They moved straight toward him without looking at anyone else. Conversations around the room grew quiet. Forks paused midair. Even the loud traders stopped their laughter. "You, human," one guard said, his voice deep and sharp. "You will come." The waiter's hands froze on the tray. His first thought was punishment. Perhaps someone had reported him for giving food to the starving child. He wanted to deny it, to say he had done nothing wrong, but the words would not form. His throat felt dry, his palms slick with sweat. The guards did not wait for his answer. One grabbed his arm, the grip like iron. The other pushed him forward. The tray slipped from his hands, bowls crashing to the floor, broth spreading like dark stains across the tiles. The sound made the whole hall flinch. Whispers followed him as he was dragged outside. Some voices were curious, some mocking, and some afraid. "That's the human," a reptilian trader muttered. "They're taking him to the council." The waiter's heart pounded harder. The council. He had never even seen them, except as shadows high above the market halls. Why would they want him? The corridors twisted as the guards marched him forward. Cold lights glowed along the ceiling, and the hum of power lines buzzed behind the walls. His shoes scraped against the metal floor, echoing between the guards' heavy steps. He passed workers, merchants, even children who stopped to stare at the sight of a human being taken by force. At last, they stopped before a tall door made of black stone, carved with strange symbols. The guards pushed it open, and he was shoved inside. The door closed behind him with a deep, final thud. The chamber was vast and silent. A round table stood at the center, and around it sat 6 alien figures, each more imposing than the next. One had horns curling back over its skull, another's skin shimmered like liquid metal, and another's eyes glowed blue like fire. At the head of the table sat the golden-robed leader, the one who had watched from the balcony. The waiter lowered his gaze instantly. His knees felt weak, but he forced himself to stand. The silence was heavy, pressing against his chest. Finally, the leader spoke. "Human," the voice rang clear, neither harsh nor kind. "You gave food to one who was not yours. Why?" The waiter's mouth opened, but no sound came. His mind raced. If he said the wrong thing, would they kill him? He swallowed hard. Because the child was hungry. A pause. Then the horned alien leaned forward. "Hungry? Many go hungry. You risked your place, your life. For what reason?" The waiter shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenching at his sides. "Because I know what it feels like, to be ignored, to be hungry." His voice cracked, but he kept speaking. "I could not walk away." The council exchanged glances. The blue-eyed one tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Strange. Most humans we see beg for themselves. Yet you gave." The leader's golden eyes fixed on him. "We wish to know if your act was accident or strength." Before he could ask what they meant, the floor beneath him shifted. A circular platform lowered, carrying him down into darkness. He stumbled, nearly falling, as the walls closed above him. The last thing he saw was the calm face of the golden-robed leader watching from above. The platform stopped with a jolt. Torches flickered along the walls of a wide chamber. The air smelled of dust and iron. Ahead, a gate of rusted metal creaked open. Behind it came the growl of something alive. His chest tightened. He stepped back, but the gate was already rising. Out crawled a creature twice his height, its body covered in armored plates, its eyes glowing red. Its claws scraped the floor, sparks flying. Saliva dripped from its open jaws as it roared, shaking the chamber. The waiter froze in terror. His heart hammered in his ears. He had no weapon, no armor, not even a stick, just his bare hands. Above, hidden behind the walls, the council watched. Their voices echoed faintly through hidden speakers. If he is weak, he dies. If he has strength, he lives. The creature lunged. He dived to the side, barely rolling away before the claws struck the ground where he had stood. Dust burst upward, stinging his eyes. He scrambled to his feet, searching desperately. There had to be something he could use. His eyes caught a broken metal rod lying against the wall. He dashed for it, grabbed it, and spun around just in time to block another strike. The rod bent under the pressure, but it held. Fear burned in his chest, but with it came something else, a spark of defiance. He had survived hunger, cruelty, and silence all his life. Was he going to die now without even trying? The creature roared again, rushing at him. He swung the rod with all his strength. It struck the beast's jaw, making it stumble. For a moment, disbelief filled him. He had heard it. The waiter's breathing was ragged, his arms shaking, but determination grew inside him. Again and again, he dodged and struck, each movement born from desperation. The beast was stronger, faster, but he was quicker, cleverer. He led it toward the broken pillars, ducking between them until the beast smashed against the stone. Dust fell, cracks spreading. The waiter used the chance to leap forward, driving the bent rod into the soft spot beneath its jaw. The creature let out a final cry, thrashing wildly before collapsing to the ground. The chamber shook, then grew still. The waiter fell to his knees, gasping for breath, sweat pouring down his face. Above, unseen eyes watched in silence. Finally, the golden-robed leader spoke. Perhaps this human is not weak after all. The silence in the chamber felt heavier than stone. The beast's body lay twisted on the ground, smoke rising from its cracked plates. The waiter's hand still clutched the bent rod, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. His arms trembled, his legs burned, but he was alive. He had survived something meant to kill him. Above, hidden behind the walls, the council member spoke quietly. Their words echoed faintly through the chamber. Impossible. No human should have lasted more than seconds. He does not fight like a soldier, yet he lives. Perhaps it was luck. The golden-robed leader's voice cut through the murmurs. Luck does not strike twice. He survives because he refuses to die. The floor shifted again, rising slowly. The waiter felt his stomach drop as the platform lifted him back toward the council chamber. He gripped the rod tighter, unsure if they would punish him for killing the creature or reward him. When the platform stopped, he stood once more before the 6 alien leaders. Their eyes studied him with the cold sharpness of blades. The horned alien leaned forward. "Human, do you understand what you have done?" He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I only wanted to live." The blue-eyed alien tilted her head. "Yet you killed a beast bred to tear through armored soldiers. You had no training, no weapon, no armor, and still you stand." The waiter shook his head quickly. "I'm not a warrior. I'm just a waiter. I carry food, clean tables, nothing more." The golden-robed leader rose from his seat. His tall figure cast a long shadow across the chamber. "Perhaps you are more. Perhaps humanity is more." His voice echoed with calm authority. "We have underestimated your kind." The words made the waiter's stomach tighten. He did not understand what they meant, but he knew this attention was dangerous. All he had wanted was to feed a hungry child. Now he stood before the most powerful beings on the station, treated as something unusual. The leader's gaze bore into him. "You will not return to your tables. From this day, you will serve here, under our eyes. You are a subject of study now." The waiter's knees nearly gave out. He wanted to protest, to beg for his quiet life back, but he bit his tongue. Speaking against them would mean death. He bowed his head, whispering, "As you wish." 2 guards stepped forward and led him out of the chamber. Instead of the dining hall, they guided him through unfamiliar corridors, past doors lined with glowing symbols. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. Finally, they stopped before a steel door and shoved him inside. The room was bare, with only a simple bed, a table, and a glowing light on the wall. It looked more like a cage than a room. The guards locked the door behind him, leaving him alone. He sat on the bed, burying his face in his hands. "What have I done?" he whispered. Hours passed in silence until the door opened again. An alien servant entered, carrying a tray of food. The servant placed it down and studied him for a moment. "You should not be alive," it muttered. "Others have faced the trial before you. None returned." The waiter looked up, his voice shaky. "Why me?" The servant gave no answer. It left quickly, locking the door once more. He ate in silence, though his stomach twisted with fear. Every sound outside the door made him tense. He thought of the child he had helped, wondering if it was safe. He thought of the council, their glowing eyes fixed on him like hunters watching prey. Later that night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every moment of the battle, the roar of the beast, the sparks when claws hit stone, the shock of driving the rod into its flesh. He had never killed before. His hands still shook when he remembered it. Yet beneath the fear, something else stirred, an ember of pride. He had survived when no one believed he could. The next day, the guards returned. "Come," one ordered. They led him through winding corridors until they reached a vast training hall. The floor was marked with circles, weapons hung on the walls, and alien soldiers trained in brutal combat drills. When the soldiers saw the human, their laughter echoed across the hall. "This is him? The one who killed the beast?" one sneered. "Look at him. Skinny arms, weak legs. It must have been luck." Maybe the beast tripped on its own claws. The waiter felt heat rise to his face. He wanted to vanish, but the guards pushed him forward. At the center of the hall, the golden-robed leader appeared once more. "Today," the leader said, "you will prove whether you are chance or strength." A tall alien warrior stepped into the circle, muscles rippling beneath his armor. He carried a long staff with blades on each end. His grin was full of sharp teeth. The leader's voice rang out. "Survive." The warrior lunged. The waiter stumbled back, barely avoiding the strike. Fear shot through him again, but his body remembered the fight with the beast. He ducked low, rolled to the side, and grabbed a wooden training staff lying nearby. His grip was weak, his arms untrained, but he held it tight. The warrior struck again, blades slashing through the air. The waiter blocked clumsily, the impact sending pain shooting up his arm. He staggered, but did not fall. Each time he was knocked down, he forced himself up again. Sweat poured down his face, his breath ragged, but his eyes burned with stubborn fire. Around the hall, the laughter slowly faded. The soldiers who had mocked him began to watch with curiosity. He was no trained fighter, but he refused to give up. Again and again, he rose from the floor, swinging, blocking, dodging. At last, the warrior struck too hard, his staff slamming into a pillar and getting stuck for a brief second. The waiter saw his chance. With a desperate cry, he swung his wooden staff against the warrior's knees. The alien crashed to the ground with a roar of pain. The hall fell silent. Every eye was on the human, standing battered and breathless, but still standing. The golden-robed leader's voice echoed. "Not luck. Strength. The smallest act has begun to grow." The station shook with alarm bells. Red lights flashed across the corridors, and a deep voice echoed through the speakers. "Warning. Enemy fleet approaching. All units prepare for defense." The sound rolled like thunder, reaching every corner of the massive structure. The waiter, still bruised from his fight in the training hall, sat in his small room when the alarms began. His heart jumped into his throat. He had seen fights break out between traitors, had seen soldiers brawl for honor, but never had he heard the station call a full defense. Outside his door, guards rushed by, their weapons glowing with power. The steady rhythm of their boots was drowned by the wail of the sirens. Moments later, the door slid open. A guard barked, "Move, human." They marched him through crowded halls where civilians panicked. Merchants grabbed their goods and fled. Mothers pulled their children away from the open corridors. Soldiers rushed to defensive stations, their voices sharp and hurried. The smell of fear was thick, stronger than any spice in the market hall. The waiter was pushed into a command chamber filled with screens showing the blackness of space. On the screens, bright dots appeared, enemy ships moving closer, their weapons already glowing. Around the room, alien commanders shouted orders in different languages, overlapping one another in a storm of voices. The golden-robed leader stood at the center, calm but stern. His glowing eyes shifted toward the human as he entered. "You will stand here and watch," the leader said. "Perhaps today we will see if humanity holds any value at all." The waiter clenched his fists nervously. He didn't understand why they wanted him here. He was no soldier, no strategist. He was just a servant who had given bread to a starving child. Yet here he stood, in the heart of command, as the station prepared for war. The first enemy strike came like a hammer. The entire station trembled. Sparks burst from the ceiling as the shock shook the floor under their feet. An officer shouted, "Shields at 70%. Another voice cried, "Outer defense destroyed." The waiter's breath caught. He saw the fear ripple through even the strongest commanders. The enemy fleet was larger, faster, merciless. The aliens on the station looked powerful, but in this moment their pride cracked. Some shouted louder to hide their fear, but their hands trembled over the controls. The golden-robed leader ordered calm, but the chamber was chaos. The waiter felt his chest tighten as he watched them argue, no one listening to the other. Every second wasted meant more lives lost. He turned his eyes to the screen and saw a small group of supply ships trapped near the enemy line. Civilians, unarmed and helpless, were caught in the crossfire. His voice rose before he could stop himself. "They'll be slaughtered if you don't move the fighters now." The room went silent. Dozens of alien eyes turned toward him, shocked at his interruption. A commander sneered, "You dare speak? You are nothing. Sit in silence." But the golden-robed leader lifted his hand. "Let him speak." The waiter swallowed hard, his heart racing. "The fighters are chasing the big warships, but the supply ships are closer. If you send half of them back now, they can protect those people before it's too late." The commanders frowned. Some muttered that he was a fool, but others glanced at the screens, realizing he was right. The enemy's smaller ships had already broken off, aiming for the helpless civilians. Reluctantly, the leader gave the order. "Pull half the fighters back. Defend the supply ships." The chamber held its breath as the move played out. On the screen, the fighters turned sharply, racing back to intercept. They clashed with the enemy seconds before the supply ships were destroyed. Flashes of light filled the void. Moments later, the civilians were pulling away to safety, shielded by the defending fighters. The commanders stared at the human, disbelief in their eyes. One finally muttered, "He was right." But the battle was far from over. The enemy's main fleet pressed harder, their weapons tearing at the station's shields. Another blast shook the command room, sending cracks down the walls. Officers shouted in panic, "Shields at 30%! Hull damage on level 5! The waiter's mind raced. He was no warrior, but he had spent years watching others from the background. He had studied movements, patterns, details no one else cared about. His eyes scanned the screens, and suddenly he noticed something. The enemy's warships always turned in the same formation, leaving their center exposed for a few seconds before closing again. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but urgent. "They leave a gap every time they turn. Right there, between the third and fourth ship. If you strike then, you can break their line." The commanders looked doubtful, but the golden-robed leader narrowed his eyes, studying the pattern. At last, he gave a sharp nod. "Do it." The station's main guns adjusted, waiting. The enemy ships began their turn, the formation shifting just as the waiter had seen. In that brief gap, the order was given. The station's cannons fired, beams of light ripping through the darkness. The enemy's center ship exploded in a burst of fire. The formation broke. For the first time, the attackers pulled back, their lines shaking, their confidence cracking. The chamber erupted with shouts, not of fear, but of triumph. Soldiers slammed their fists on the consoles. Officers shouted orders with new strength. For a moment, the tide of battle had turned. The golden-robed leader's eyes remained fixed on the human. His voice was calm, but it carried a new weight. Not luck, not chance. This one sees what others cannot. The waiter stood frozen, sweat dripping down his face. He had not planned to be here, had not wanted to lead. But as the battle raged on, he realized something terrifying and powerful. The aliens were looking at him not as a servant anymore. They were looking at him as if he carried hope. The station groaned under the pressure of battle. Sparks burst from broken wires, and the metallic walls trembled as another enemy strike hit. The air smelled of smoke and burning circuits. Soldiers rushed through the corridors, shouting orders, while civilians crowded into shelters, fear heavy in their eyes. In the command chamber, the human waiter stood among towering alien leaders and officers. His clothes were simple and torn, his hands still trembling from the decisions he had made only minutes ago. Yet every alien eye in the room kept glancing toward him. He was no longer invisible. He had saved lives when others hesitated. Another blast rattled the floor, sending a console crashing down. An officer shouted, "Our shields are dropping below 20%. Panic crept back into the voices of the commanders. They barked orders, but their plans collided, each one shouting louder to be heard. The chamber filled with noise, confusion tearing apart their discipline. The waiter stared at the screens, watching the enemy fleet tighten its grip around the station. His heart pounded, but his eyes searched the patterns carefully. He noticed how the enemy ships moved like hunters, fast, ruthless, but always predictable when they closed for the kill. "They're driving you into panic," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. "You're fighting them the way they want. If you keep chasing their moves, you'll lose." The room fell quiet again. An officer turned to him, sneering. "And what do you suggest, human? Shall we throw bread at them as you did with that child?" Laughter rose from a few corners, bitter and mocking. But the golden-robed leader raised his hand, silencing the chamber. His glowing eyes locked onto the human. "Speak." The waiter swallowed, gathering his courage. "Stop chasing them. Make them chase you. Pull the station back, weaken one side on purpose. They'll rush in, thinking they've found weakness, then strike all at once when they're inside the trap." The commanders murmured among themselves. Some shook their heads, unwilling to listen to advice from a human. Others leaned closer to the screens, studying the suggestion. It was risky, too risky for their pride. But the golden-robed leader gave the order. "Do as he says." Slowly, the station shifted its defenses, drawing back its forces on one side. The enemy took the bait, swarming toward the weak opening. Their ships poured in, weapons blazing, certain of victory. That was when the station fired everything. Cannons, missiles, and fighters rained destruction on the clustered enemy ships. The void outside filled with fire and broken hulls. Several of the enemy's largest ships exploded, their fragments spinning into the darkness. A cheer erupted in the command chamber. Soldiers pounded their chests. Officers shouted triumph. The human stood frozen, staring at the screen in disbelief. His idea had worked. He had turned their fear into courage, their defeat into hope. But the battle was far from over. More enemy ships advanced, their weapons tearing into the station's hull. Explosions shook the floor, throwing officers off their feet. "Hull breach on deck 7, one voice shouted. "We're losing oxygen in Sector 9, another cried. The waiter steadied himself against a railing, his body shaking. He could feel the fear inside him like ice, but he also saw the same fear in the eyes of those around him. The mighty alien commanders, who had looked down on him for being human, now looked to him as if waiting for another answer. He thought of the child he had helped. He thought of how small that kindness had been, yet how it had led him here. He had never wanted to be a leader, but the moment was no longer about what he wanted. Lives depended on him. He stepped forward, his voice firm despite his shaking body. "You can't win with power alone. You need each other. Stop shouting. Work together. Listen." The room grew quiet. The officers hesitated, glancing at one another. Slowly, the golden-robed leader gave a single nod. The commanders stopped arguing and began working in unison. Orders became clearer, soldiers steadier. The tide of panic turned into focus. On the screens, the enemy pressed closer. The waiter's eyes followed the battle, searching for weaknesses. He noticed the enemy's command ship holding back, directing the fight from a distance. Its weapons were powerful, but it relied on others to shield it. "There," he said, pointing. "Strike their command ship, take out their leader, and the rest will fall apart." The leader gave the order without hesitation. The station's weapons redirected, fighters breaking formation to carve a path. They fought through enemy fire, ships exploding around them. Finally, the main cannons locked onto the command ship. With a thunderous blast, beams of light tore through its hull. The enemy flagship exploded in a massive burst of flame, pieces scattering across the void. The rest of the fleet wavered, their formation collapsing without direction. Some ships fled, others fired wildly, but the order was gone. The station's defenders pressed forward, driving them back until the battlefield was clear. The chamber erupted once more in cheers, louder than before. Soldiers embraced. Officers shouted in triumph, and relief spread like fresh air after smoke. For the first time in hours, the station no longer trembled under enemy fire. The golden-robed leader turned toward the human. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried across the chamber. "Today, this station stands because of you. You, who were once only a servant. You, who gave food to a child when no one else cared. From small kindness comes great strength." The waiter's knees nearly buckled. He had no words, no understanding of how he had reached this point. He was just one man who had refused to look away from hunger. And now, aliens who once ignored him looked at him with respect, even awe. As the cheers continued, the human stood quietly, his heart heavy with fear, pride, and disbelief. He knew this battle was only the beginning. His life had changed forever, and so had the way the galaxy would see humanity. The battlefield outside the station was silent now, broken ships drifting like dead husks across the stars. Fires still burned on shattered hulls, and the wreckage floated endlessly in the void. Inside the station, the smell of smoke and metal lingered, but the alarms had gone quiet. For the first time in hours, there was peace. The human waiter stood in the command chamber, his body tired, his hands shaking. He had no armor, no weapon, no rank, yet every alien eye in the room turned toward him with respect. Soldiers who once mocked him now bowed their heads. Officers who once ignored him now waited for his words. He was no longer invisible. The golden-robed leader stepped forward, his gaze heavy but calm. This station lives because of you. You saved thousands when others faltered. You gave us courage when we had none. The waiter lowered his eyes, his voice small. I did what anyone would do. But the leader shook his head. No. Many had power, wealth, knowledge. Yet it was you, a servant, who acted. You are proof that humanity carries strength we cannot measure. The word spread quickly. Soon the story of the human's courage ran through the station like fire. Traders spoke of him in the markets. Workers whispered his name in the corridors. Soldiers repeated his orders as though they were laws. Even the alien child he had once fed listened with wide eyes as others described the man who had saved them all. At first, he tried to return to his small room to hide from the weight of attention. But the people did not let him. Wherever he walked, aliens bowed, offering food, gifts, or simply a touch of respect. Some called him the brave human. Others whispered, the hope of the weak. He felt uneasy, unsure how to carry such a burden. In his heart, he was still the man who wiped tables and carried trays. But as days passed, he saw the way eyes brightened when he appeared, how fear lessened when his voice gave calm. And slowly, he realized that what began with bread for a starving child had grown into something far greater. The council summoned him again, this time not in chains, not as a test, but as an equal. The chamber no longer felt cold. The leader's eyes no longer carried scorn. The golden-robed figure spoke to him not as a servant, but as one who had earned his place. We will face more battles, the leader said. The enemy is not gone, only broken. When they return, we will need strength, unity, and hope. Will you stand with us? The waiter hesitated. He thought of the weight of their words, of the danger that would surely come. But then he remembered the child's trembling hands, the way the people had cheered, the lives saved because he had spoken when others would not. Slowly he nodded. I will. From that day, his life was no longer his own. He was trained not as a servant, but as a guide. Soldiers asked for his advice. Leaders sought his judgment. He did not command with fear or power, but with something stronger, compassion. He reminded them to see the small, to protect the weak, to never turn away from kindness. And when the enemy returned, as the leader had warned, the station was ready. Not because its weapons were stronger, not because its soldiers were braver, but because hope had taken root. They fought side by side, aliens and humans together, each battle a test of unity. And each time, the human who had once been only a waiter stood at the heart of it, giving courage where none remained. Stories spread beyond the station, reaching distant worlds. Tales of the human who turned weakness into strength, who faced monsters and fleets without armor, who gave his last piece of bread to a starving child. To some, he became a symbol. To others, a legend. But to himself, he remained the same, an ordinary man who could not look away from suffering. In quiet moments, when the halls were empty and the stars shone bright beyond the station windows, he often thought back to that single night in the dining hall. The hungry eyes of a child, the simple bowl of bread and broth, the risk that had seemed so small then, but had changed everything. He realized the truth. Great battles, great victories, even legends often begin with something small. A word, a choice, a kindness. And so the human who once bent his back to clean tables now walked with his head high, not as a servant, not even as a soldier, but as a light in the darkness. For the galaxy had learned something it would never forget. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can turn into the greatest hope of all.